everyone, back again with Colour With Me, and today I'm showing you how I coloured this beautiful King Charles Cavalier dog. I developed the line artwork myself, and what we're going to be using today is the Spectrum Noir illustrators. The colours that I'm using today, if you're wanting to join in, is GB 1, 4, 7 and 9, EB7, BG2, 4 and 6. So the GB family, the golden brown family, the BG family, sorry, the BG family, which is the brown greys, and also the EB to get some of those nice dark shadows in there. So I started off actually with a classique pen because it's got that lovely chisel nib where you can lay down a lot of colour first, and I'm just using it in the lightest shade, which is GB1, and I'm just laying down where I'm wanting my colour to go. It just gives you a reference point for deciding where you're then going to want to add more colour. So don't worry about getting a really smooth blend here, because we're going to be going over and over and over this with the illustrators in a moment. It's just to give you a little bit of a reference point and to take away that whiteness that's quite scary when you first start off. So you can use that as a bit of a reference yourself if you want to. Then going in with my GB9, so that's my darkest shade that I've got in the golden browns, and I'm putting in where I'm wanting the darkness to be. So that's going down alongside his head, as you can see. I'm also going down along the black lines that I've put in there for you. So I've put in some black lines in the line work, just there to guide you as to where to put these darker shades. So just go, basically you're just going over those black lines again, filling in as well as you're going along. I like to keep my line art work for colouring as minimal as possible, because you don't want really those black lines to show as much. So it's nice to be able to do that so that you can bring your shading in with your colouring. So I'm just going around the eye a little bit here. Now the key points for this colouring page is going to be the eyes and the nose. Anytime you do an animal, especially a cute one like this, or a human indeed, the eyes is the key to it. Once you get those eyes sorted, they draw you in, and then you don't see any little mistakes that you may have made around them. So now what I've done is I've moved on to GB7, so I've dropped down a couple of shades, and I'm just going over the top of where I'd put down that GB9, just extending those lines, flicking the lines just that little bit further out to take away the lighter shade. And then same again with the GB4, it's going in, and I'm just extending those lines even further with that lovely flicking technique. If you're interested in the flicking technique, I've got a video showing that on my channel if you want to go and have a look at that. It's 3 ways to blend. Okay, so because you've put down some of the lighter shades, what that's done is it's pushed some of the GB9 back, and so it's not as dark anymore. So I like to go back in again with my GB9 just to get that darkness back into those areas that I want it to be. So now I'm moving on to the face section. Same technique, I'm just extending those lines that I decided on a little bit further, using little flicks around there to merge that colour into the top of the head. And then I've gone in with a GB one just there, just over the top, just to blur those any harsh lines that might be. And then moving around the eyes and the side of his face. Coming together. Okay, so here we are. I'm working on the eye here. So one of the key things about dogs is they do have darkness around their eyes, and that is what draws you in even more. So I've just extended that darkness just a little bit more, and then I've also gone down the side of his face with the darkness and in the creases along his snout, in where the shadows would be. It's just following the lines where I've put them. And then again going in with the GB7, just extending that out with the flick technique to get a nice blend. And then the GB4 again. Then I'm just going to darken up around the eye just that little bit more. Give him a little bit of an eyeliner. Okay. Now, that looks pretty good. However, what needs to be done, as I've always said, is to go a little bit darker. When you go darker, it instantly changes your image. It's looking a little bit flat, even though I've got some lovely blending and shading going on there. It is looking a bit flat. Now I couldn't go darker with the GBs because the darkest GB was the GB9. So I'm using a brown that complements it. So that I chose the EB7s. So EB7, and I'm going in along the sides of the face on the ear, using that flicking technique and just putting in the darkness where I'm really wanting it to be. Extending that out a little bit more, a bit at a time. Don't be scared, just a bit at a time. Okay, and then also where I had the EB9, the GB9s in the ear, I've gone in there and just darkened some of the areas as well. It's kind of a swooshing technique with this one. So what I would do is practice this flick technique where what you're actually doing is you're trying to start with a fine and end with a fine. I'll put that on my blog page so you can have a look and see what I'm talking about. But you can see instantly that has given more depth to this image and just made it pop just by adding that extra layer of shadow within it. So there I'm just putting a bit more shadow around where the ear is meeting with the head, just to give it a little bit more definition. And then I'm also coming into the face, so darkness around the eyes, as I've been saying, in the creases where the shadows would be, and along those lines that I've given you to help define where the little areas will be. Now you'll find that you won't have to blend this out much because you've put so much layer down already that your paper is actually quite juicy with alcohol now, and so it starts to blend out as you're colouring. So it's much easier to do now that you've got wet paper. But you know, just gone back in there with the GB4 just to darken around that eye just that little bit more, because once I'd added the EB7, it made that lighter area around the eye just look too light. So just go back in and darken it down. So now we're going to work on the other side. So it's exactly the same technique, going in with the GB9, working along the lines that I've given you to show the shading, putting in shadows where they would be, and also blending then in, going to lighter shade to lighter shade to lighter shade. Now this ear is actually, what I've decided is it's going to be lighter than the other side, as that's where my light direction is coming from. So I'm actually going to leave this ear just that little bit lighter than the other side. But if you see there on the ear, what I've done there, you can see that swooping flick that you need to try and practice to get. Can you see where it's actually starts at a point and then ends at a point as well? So now going in with my lighter shade, GB7, and just extending those lines, extending those shadows just to make them blend into the lighter shades. There you go. So it's just a normal flick technique going on with some of it, but then that swoop technique is quite key in the middle, so you're not having a distinct starting point to your pen. Then GB4, flick that in, extend the lines. Also remember with your alcohol inks that as they go on, they are darker than when they've dried. Okay, so you want to go in, have a play, see what you come up with, leave it for a bit and then come back again. Don't be afraid of it, just keep going and trying. There we go. So I'm just adjusting a little bit here. So as you start colouring, you will see areas where it just doesn't sit right with your eye. So you just want to just go in and play around a little bit more, add a little bit more, add a little bit more, add a little bit more. So now I'm working on the other side of his face. Again, using the lines that I've given you to help define where the shadows and the darkness will be. You can see with the key area around the eye, I'm using much finer movements, much shorter strokes, as I'm not wanting to make any kind of mistakes here, because that is where the focal point of the image will be. You're always drawn to eyes. Looks a bit strange now, but just keep going. So now I'm going in with my lighter shade, and then just extending those dark areas. Always looks odd when you've put that first darker shade in. It would never look right until you actually start putting in those lighter shades and blending it out. And it is just extending the lines that you've already put down. Now I have done this video at ×3 speed, so you can see that I'm colouring it a lot faster than what I am in real life. That's because otherwise this video would be like 2 hours long, I think. So what I will do is I put my real-time videos on my website in the members area. And talking about that, you can download this image that I've done from my website. You can either purchase it, or if you sign up and become a member of the site for free, then you can go in the members area and download this for free as well. I've put it in there just for my members as a freebie. But I will put the real-time colouring images on in the members only tutorials area. So there we go. You can see there how there is a complete difference between the blended on the one side and on the other without having that darker shade in. You can see how it looked quite flat. So what I'm doing again is going in with that EB7 and just going over those areas where I first started with the GB9 and making the dark areas really dark where I'm wanting them to be. Around the eye, just like I was saying, in the shadows between the ear and the face, and also areas within the fur on the ears, just to give extra texture. And just as I was saying before, because I've laid down a lot of colour already, that paper is lovely and primed. It's quite juicy with alcohol already, so it's blending as I'm actually colouring. So I don't need really to blend too much with a lighter shade afterwards. You can see here I'm just comparing one eye to the other, just to make sure he hasn't got a bit of a wonk on, and just going in and touching up areas that need just that little bit of extra definition or a bit of a change. So there again you can see now I've put that EB7 in underneath the eye. It has actually made the lightness around his eye just a little bit too light. So I've gone back in with the EB9 just to tone that lightness down a little bit. It's not for the blending, it's just to, it needed to go just that little bit darker now I'd actually got that dark shade in. Okay, so now I'm going to concentrate on the eyes. So I'm going in with the fine nib of the black, and I'm going around the eye and making that eyeball a nice rounder shape, and filling in that little part in the corner of your eye in black as well, because that's black in dogs. There you go, and the same on the other side. So I'm just filling in that little corner part of the eye, and then going around the eye to give it that nice round shape. Now when I looked at this, I felt that actually that top part of the eye was too open compared to the other eye, and so I just put it, shaded it in black, and there we go. That was all that was needed. Made sure I'd left the highlights in the eye to make them look shiny, and already you can see you're drawn to its beautiful eyes. So I'm just putting the EB7, the darkest shade, into the second ear now. Going along the black lines that I've given you. There's that swoop technique I've been talking about. And then just defining again where the ear and the head meet. And because that area at the top there was just that little bit too dark, I've gone in with the GB9 again just to take some of that lightness away. Even though I'm wanting this side of the ear to look a little bit lighter, it was just a little bit too much for my personal taste, my eye, how I look at it. But your eye might see different. There we are. Right, so I'm going to have a look at the nose now. So a nose on a dog has got a shine to it, so you have to make sure that you've got your highlights in there. So what I first do, as I did with when I first started colouring, I go in with the lightest shade. So I'm going in with my BG2, my brown grey, and I'm just marking with the fine tip where the highlights are going to be on the dog, and also putting in areas where I'm wanting it to be a bit of a lighter shade rather than black, just to give a little bit more definition. Then I go in with the next shade up, so the BG4, and the BG4, basically I'm just colouring around those highlights that I've made once I'm happy with them, and then just going around giving it a little bit more definition. Then the BG6, and I'm just colouring everything else that's left, because going straight in with black can be quite scary and intimidating. So if you go in with your darkest grey first, you can actually just have a look and not feel as scared of what you're doing. And then when you're happy, go in with your black and then go over where you'd put that darkest grey. Yeah. And you can see I'm using very small flicking motions, just touching up here and there where I'm wanting it to be, leaving a few areas for definition in the lighter grey that I put in to start with. And then just eyeballing it, thinking how I'm wanting it to be. Does it look right yet? I've just made those highlights that I first put in just a little bit smaller, and then I go in with my BG4 and just go around those highlights that I left, making them just that little bit smaller but with a grey. So you've still got the highlight there, but it's not as defined, but also leave a little white area. Right, so let's try and tackle white fur. So white fur is difficult. I'm still working on it myself. I completely admit this. It's something that I am practicing and I need to practice more. But for this image, because the focal point was the head, you can get away with the body not being as detailed. At least that's what I think anyway. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. So, white fur actually isn't white. If you look at an image and look at the white fur, there's all sorts of colours going on in there. There's the greys, sometimes even yellows and things in there, depending on the shade of the white. It's a very strange thing to say, but the shade of the white can be very different. So with this one, I went in with my brown greys. So these are greys with a tint of brown within it. And just like I've done with the other parts, I first go in with my lightest colour that I had, which was the brown grey 2. And I'm just laying down where I'm wanting some shadows to be. So I've gone under the nose, I've gone under the mouth part, around the jowls slightly, down the side of his face, and I've put some defining lines just up on his forehead, just to break that whiteness up a bit. So now we're moving to underneath his head. So he's going to have little folds in there. So I've done kind of little triangle, abstract triangles underneath, and I'm just leaving some of that and then filling other parts in, putting the shadow underneath his ear. Then down the side, the back of his hind legs, and in between the toes. Now when you do in between the toes, you want to make sure that you're doing your shadows on the same side each time. Does that make sense? So if you're doing your shadow on the right side of the toe, then you do it on the right side of the next toe and the next toe. Then I've gone underneath his belly, down the side of his leg, the toes again, same again with his other leg, and then also the back leg. So it's very, very rough. That is just me laying down my lightest colour just to get comfortable with where I'm putting my shadows. Because it's in the lightest colour, it doesn't make such an impact. You're not going to see it as a mistake. And as you can see, now that that colour's dried on the face and the belly, it's very, very light. It's just there as a reference for you to make sure that that's exactly where you're wanting to go. And then I'm going in with my next shade up, so my BG4, and I've started using more of the flick technique now, where I'm just extending those lines out, flicking over the top of where I decided I wanted that shadow to be. Then moving on to the face, so I'm darkening underneath his mouth, down the side of his ear where the dark shadow would be, underneath his chin where it would be darker, flicking out those shades there just to give them texture. also around the snout, around the nose, and around the little jowls there. So if you're finding that when you're flicking fine lines, you're not getting the flow that you're wanting, don't be scared to move the paper around. You can see I've turned it upside down here because I find it quite difficult to do fine flicks in a backwards direction. So I've just turned it round to make sure that my flicks are as nice a finer point as I can get them. And then just extending those lines that I've put on his face and around his eyes. And also putting it where the brown is meeting the white, just to blend that in that little bit more. There we are. So now I've gone back to the lightest, the BG2, and what I'm doing now is using the same flicking technique and extending those lines out, adding just that little bit more where it's white. Now that you've put some shading in, you can feel more comfortable and more confident in making some of that white a little bit more darker. It doesn't seem as if you're actually taking the whiteness of the fur away, if that makes sense. You can see it still looks white. That's a white dog. It's just all the shadows that are on it. So just extend those lines out, add a bit more shading where you think that it needs it. As you're doing it more and more, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to feel that actually that bit doesn't look quite right. It needs to go just that little bit darker. And then, as I always do, I put in some really dark just to give it that really good added depth. So I've gone with my darkest BG that I had, which was BG6, and I've just put that in where there would be definite shadows. So that's underneath the belly, in between the toes, along the back line of his leg. So just adding that little bit that's a little bit more darker has added that a little bit more depth, you can see. A bit more underneath his face and around where the ear is, underneath his mouth and under his chin. And then just along the creases and folds that I've indicated for you on his face. And just the top of his head there, just to give it a bit more definition, give it a little bit more of a curve. So you can leave it at that if you want to. I wanted to have a play and see what a white gel pen would do. This dog that I used as a reference, his whiskers were actually white, so I decided to go along the whisker lines that I put in for you with the white gel pen, just to see what would happen and what it looked like. It's got some flyaway hairs as well that I've put at the top there, and I've gone over those with the gel pen too, just to see what happened. And it's turned him into a bit of an older dog, I think. I ended up not actually liking that whiteness around his eyebrows, and so once that white gel was dry, I went back in with my alcohol pens and just coloured over the top of them again. But that was quite good. It worked out quite nicely, because what happened was you didn't have that dark black line, you get a lighter shade. I then thought I'd have a play and see about putting in finer details. So I've just gone along all of the darker black line, all over the dog, around the edges and outsides, and just done little flicks of white gel just to break up that black line, so that it isn't such a cartoon image. And like I said, if you decide that you aren't happy with that, you can always wait to let it to dry and then go back over again with your alcohol pens, just to take that harsh whiteness away. But what you've done is you've still broken up that harsh black line. But I quite liked it. I think it looked quite good. But like I say, I'm always playing, I'm always trying things out and learning. I might not do this again, but it was worth a go. There we are, I was just checking there that it had dried and wasn't coming back over again. But you can see I didn't quite like the harshness of those white lines around there, so I just went in with one of my lighter shades. I believe that one is the GB4, and just went over it, and you can see that it dulls that whiteness down a little bit. And then I went in with my GB9 again, and just darken those down a little bit more where I wanted it to be darker. There we are. I felt that was a lot better. And just to break up the whiteness of the lines around that I've put, I just went back again with a brown grey over the top, just to take that harshness away. And if I didn't stop playing there, I could play forever. And so I decided that was it. I was going to leave it. I may come back to it again someday, finish working on that body a little bit more, but I decided to leave this tutorial at this point. So I really hope that you've enjoyed watching. I hope that you get a chance to go to my website, www.getsetcraft.com, and I hope you can colour along with me. If you do, please share your images. I would really love to see them. You can share them to my website or to my Facebook page, Get Set Craft, and I'd love to see them. So thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.